Welcome to Screenshots, where I dissect screenshots of my favorite screens and shots of the week. Let's start with a lineup change that turned the week around for South Carolina. I thought this would be a good one because there were so many good defensive plays in the first 6 minutes alone for South Carolina that it was hard to keep track of all of them in live time. After losing to Oklahoma earlier in the week, South Carolina bounced back in a huge way, giving Vanderbilt its first loss of the season. Prior to Sunday's win, for the first time in 5 years, the Gamehawks weren't ranked as a number one defense in the SEC, with both LSU and Texas ahead of them. You knew that Dawn, after watching her team give up 8 uncontested overtime buckets, was going to tighten things up on defense. She unleashed Agat Makir, SC's athletic 6'1", lanky freshman guard, and made the player who subbed out for her, 6'6" center Medina Okot, a much more traditional center, look good in the process. So I want to start with a somewhat innocuous play towards the end of the first quarter to highlight what the game could have looked like had Staley not made this adjustment. Michaela Blake's, the nation's fastest and deadliest scoring guard, attacking the space that Okot, and just about any other big, has to give her, and finding teammates for high-yield looks. Instead, SC went small, throwing multiple guards and multiple defenses at Vanderbilt, stunning point guard Aubrey Galvin, who leads freshmen in assists and never really giving her a chance to get comfortable. On the first possession of the game, Tanaya Latson forced a steal, and then SC switched it up immediately, with Agat Makir picking up Galvin from three-quarters court. I thought it was kind of interesting that both Makir and Latson attacked Galvin's crossover. Agat kind of goaded her into it with the reach with the left hand, swiping with her right hand as soon as Galvin tried the crossover. It helps to have a 6'4" wingspan and the hawkish anticipation of a parking meter attendant, but this isn't just athleticism. It's studied scouting report genius that makes errors feel more self-inflicted than they are. Against Vandy and Blake's in particular, who runs off screens all game to get open, denial is the name of the game. Makir picked up three-quarters court again, turning the half court into a post-9/11 TSA security checkpoint, with the game clocks dropping into a 1-3-1 zone. Blake signals for Galvin to get the ball swinging right, but she can't because of Agat's denial. Again, Makir goads the ball where she wants it to go, right into the middle, where Joyce Edwards bumps her defender into a loose dribble, and Makir pounces again. She dives on the ball, Latson gets a layup, SC gets off to an 11-2 start, Vandy coach Shea Ralph calls a timeout, and Galvin goes to the bench to regroup. I love when an adjustment mixes the tactical with the psychological. Did it make sense for Staley to unleash Makir against a guard-oriented, spaced-out team? For sure. Did it make it even more sense to hit a freshman point guard who's on the road at the helm of a Vanderbilt team that's never faced this much scrutiny or attention with a first-quarter punch out of the gate? Yeah, even more so. And by the way, I just want to make it clear, Agat wasn't necessarily a slouch here, and I think Dawn Staley wanted to make that clear after the game too. And there's some defensive plays where you can see that she is re-engaged in a way that she wasn't against Oklahoma. Here, she pounces on Ayanna Mitchell, who's struggling to find an escape hatch with Tessa Johnson, Maddie McDaniels, who's incredible defensively all game as well, and Tanaya Latson denying her an escape pass. Agat makes the nice kickback out to Latson after the steal. Okot successfully pounced again a couple minutes later for another steal with, again, the usual suspects denying the ball. Joyce Edwards down low, Tessa Johnson preventing the catch to Michaela Blake's, and Tanaya Latson up top on Galvin. Now, part of me wonders if Okot, who's been finding her range as of late, just kind of needed a reminder that aggressiveness and being big and imposing is what got her here and is what has made her so successful for South Carolina. So maybe there was a bit of, mental jiu-jitsu going on alongside the tactical change that allowed South Carolina to win this game. So yeah, there you have it. This is why Dawn Staley, the best adjustment coach in college basketball, hasn't lost back-to-back games since the 2018-2019 season. I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think this new lineup and the kind of newfound depth and versatility that Dawn Staley loves to have so she can throw multiple looks at different teams will allow them to actually go a little bit farther, maybe make a Final Four run, when we actually saw this as more of a rebuilding, retooling season for South Carolina? Next, we have to talk about the defense of Iowa big Ava Heiden, who had 18 points, 8 rebounds, 4 steals, and 2 blocks against Ohio State in a blowout Big Ten victory. That 6 sucks, not to mention the countless deflections and rotations that don't get counted on the stat sheet for the sophomore who anchors the 3rd best defense in the Big Ten. I would say let's just start with a simple fact of her size, which is 6'4", and the fact that she makes herself bigger by always having her legs and arms splayed out as widely as possible, like she's like a walking coat rack or something. She's sagging way off her check. Elsa Lemula, a 14% three-point shooter, but she's also always got an eye on the action. On a play in the 3rd, she pulls back to help Kylie Furback on a Jeloni Cambridge cut. Then she steps up to help on the dribble handoff. And then she rushes back to guard Elsa on the roll. A great example of how the angles you take to cut off passes work in conjunction with the rotation itself. And she boxes out, of course, to finish the play because she always does. And you've also got this ineffable quality of feel, which we don't talk about as much in the defensive end, but Ava Heiden definitely has it. Take this play in the 1st quarter where Ava Heiden is guarding her check, but she's not really thinking about her check again. She's thinking about the pass. On an isolated side pick and roll, one of the hardest actions to guard with 2 defenders, Heiden not only cuts off Ava Watson, but she knows that when she does that, Watson's going to go to her next option, a dump off that Heiden picks off with ease. It's a reminder that recovery is often about anticipation. If you're behind, you have to think about what your opponent is going to do next, not what they're doing right now. Take a play where she switches onto Cambridge after Feuerbach gets hit with a hard screen. Heiden immediately drops down low, knowing the guard is going to try to feed the post for the mismatch, and then she deflects the pass. Sometimes I wonder if opponents pass into her with a bit of a laissez-faire attitude because it sometimes looks like she's not taking up as much space or making a lot of movements. But that's a mistake, though, because while she doesn't have to move a lot, she's economical with how she moves, and she's incredibly big and she's incredibly smart. A lot of what I talked about here is a big reason why Iowa had a 42-14 advantage in the paint against Ohio State while shutting down Jeloni Cambridge. All right, last but not least, I want to talk about how Aaliyah Chavez's progress as a playmaker and her decision-making and her relationship with Jenny Veronchek culminated in her 15-point overtime explosion against South Carolina. Aaliyah actually struggled earlier in this game, missing her first 5 shots, including 2 heavily contested jumpers 6 seconds into the shot clock, a habit we've discussed on the podcast before. Here's Veronchek, who is constantly in dialogue with Chavez, talking to her after the shot, before taking a timeout and pulling her aside for a second. By the way, for fans of the unexpected beauty of basketball synchronicity, I caught this moment of Chavez, Veronchek, and Reagan Beers all making the possession change signal at the same time. I don't know, maybe foreshadowing, perhaps, future chemistry. I don't know. So much of the success, though, for a high-volume, high-difficulty shooter is going to be about trust. The belief that she'll get back the ball after she gives it up. Here, Chavez bobbles the ball in a crossover, so she makes a smart decision of giving it up before leaning on an old Steph Curry trick, setting the screen to confuse the defense and actually opening yourself up. She gets the ball back from Reagan Beers in the exact same spot, but in a much better position, attacking a closeout against a rushing Agot McKeer, absorbing the bump from behind and finishing the and one. Now, Chavez is a flamethrower, but she's also learning how to set the table for her teammates, and it's a hard job figuring out how to balance both. Being a point guard isn't just about making passes, it's about being a game manager. And after the game, she told reporters she wanted to make a concerted effort to get the ball into Zaya Van's hot hands. Here, she eyes Van down before catching the inbounds pass and tracks her all the way down the court in the 2nd quarter, before driving against SC's questionable after-basket transition defense that I'm sure did not have Dawn Staley smiling, and then she finds Van for 3. Now, let's skip to the fun part, her 15-point overtime explosion. Chavez is a fast player on a traditionally fast team, and that's great. But great things also happen when she slows it down and lets the play develop. Beers, who finished 8 for 9 in the post, is occupying the attention of both Medina Okot and Joyce Edwards here. Peyton Verhulst, one of the best cutters in the game, forces Latson to follow her. So Chavez gets to cook on an island against Tessa Johnson. The best part, she leaves just 7 seconds on the shot clock, hitting a huge 3 while also killing the clock in a high leverage moment. That is a perfect example of how a scoring point guard can leverage the game and manage it and ice it with their shot. One thing I've enjoyed about Oklahoma is how much her teammates have been willing to guide her as well. Here, on one of the final possessions of the game, she struggles to set the offense while Brooklyn Stewart barks instructions to her while waiting to check in. Chavez doesn't really figure it out on this one. She eventually almost throws a ball out of bounds while trying to force a pass to Peyton Verhulst, but it goes off a South Carolina player's hands, and it means that Oklahoma's going to get another chance to score. You'll also see Jenny Veronchek kind of pull her, get her attention for a second. And she makes this sort of diagonal movement with her arm. And it turns out she's signaling the exact direction of the cut that Verhulst makes on an inbounds play, which she finishes after a pinpoint pass from Chavez. By the time Chavez hit her final three, it was all cosmetic, but I found it fitting that it came with the shot clock basically expiring.